I wake up and the world is wrong. Not forgot to put the bins out wrong. More like the gentle, life-sustaining whir of my oxygen concentrator has been replaced by the kind of silence that usually precedes a jump scare in a horror movie. Wrong. My chest tightens. It's not just the usual morning anxiety that comes with lungs that decided to retire early. This is the kind of tightening that screams red alert. "Okay, Mike, don't panic," I mutter to myself, my voice already raspy. Probably just a breaker, or a squirrel. A very ambitious, suicidal squirrel chewed through the line. Wishful thinking, that. I haul myself out of bed, each breath a conscious, deliberate effort, like manually pumping a rusty old bellows. The backup battery on the oxygen unit is on, a single, accusing green light blinking in the semi-darkness. It's more of a taunt than a comfort. It's got maybe 2 hours, tops, if I'm lucky. And I haven't felt lucky since my doctor, 2 years ago, gave my lungs the kind of sympathetic look you give a 3-legged dog at the shelter. He'd used phrases like significant impairment and long-term oxygen therapy. I'd translated that too. Your breathing apparatus is now officially on the fritz. Enjoy the accessories. This machine, this humming, whirring box of life, isn't a suggestion on a doctor's note. It's my co-pilot, my wingman, the only reason I get to see the sunrise instead of becoming worm food. A quick, fumbling check of the breaker box in the hallway. All switches firmly in the on position. No tripped circuits. So not an internal issue. My gaze drifts to the bedroom window, and that's when the suicidal squirrel theory takes a sharp, horrifying turn into, oh, it's her. There she is, Karen, president of the Rosewood Lane Homeowners Association, though she carries herself more like the self-appointed queen of a very small, very beige kingdom. Mid-50s, sporting a visor that looks like it could deflect small-caliber bullets, and clutching a clipboard to her chest as if it contains the sacred texts of suburban tyranny. And, oh, what's that in her other hand? A pair of shiny, heavy-duty wire cutters, glinting with a disturbing amount of righteous purpose in the early morning light. She's standing by my outdoor power meter, my very essential, please God don't touch that power meter. My blood runs cold, then hot, then cold again. I bang on the window, a weak, desperate thud. I try to shout, but it comes out as more of a strangled wheeze. "Karen!" I finally manage, my voice cracking like old paint. "What in the sweet name of all that is holy and electric are you doing?" She looks up, not startled, not even mildly surprised, but with the serene, almost beatific calm of someone who has just achieved a higher state of bureaucratic enlightenment. Or maybe she's just finished a really satisfying prune juice. "Mr. Henderson," she calls back, her voice carrying across the dew-kissed lawn with the kind of forced cheerfulness that usually precedes bad news. "Good morning. Just addressing a minor infraction, nothing to concern yourself with." She gestures vaguely with the wire cutters towards my prize-winning, well, my only garden gnome, Bartholomew. "Your gnome, Bartholomew, I believe you call him?" "Yes, he's encroaching on Mrs. Periwinkle's petunia buffer zone by a full 3/4 of an inch. It's a rather egregious violation. Section 12, subsection B, paragraph 4 of the Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions clearly states, my gnome. She's talking about my gnome." Bartholomew is a cheerful little fellow, stout, rosy-cheeked, holding a miniature fishing rod. My granddaughter picked him out. He's about as offensive as a fluffy kitten. "My gnome?" I roar. Or at least I attempt a roar. It's probably more of a pained squeak. "Karen, that's the power to my medical equipment. I need that to breathe. My lungs, Karen, my lungs are counting on that electricity." The panic is a clawing beast in my chest now, making the already difficult task of breathing nearly impossible. Karen merely tilts her head, a small, unsympathetic smile playing on her lips. Rules are rules, Mr. Henderson. Non-compliant decorative items may result in temporary amenity suspension. Power, as you know, is an amenity provided to compliant residents. She pauses, as if for dramatic effect. Besides, the constant humming from your apparatus has been cited in 3 separate complaints as orally offensive and disruptive to the natural soundscape of Rosewood Lane. Consider this a final warning. And then, with a decisive, almost gleeful snip from those menacing cutters, she does it. The little green light on my oxygen unit inside, the one that was blinking its brave little heart out, goes dark for a terrifying, eternal second before the internal battery kicks in with a protesting, high-pitched beep. My heart doesn't just plummet, it freefalls into my boots. She gives a satisfied nod, like she's just saved the neighborhood from a clear and present danger. Bartholomew the Gnome, terror of the buffer zone. She then tucks the wire cutters into her fanny pack. Yes, a fanny pack, because of course she wears a fanny pack, and struts away, leaving me staring in stunned, breathless disbelief. The audacity, the sheer, unadulterated, gnome-hating, life-endangering audacity of it all. This wasn't just an HOA dispute anymore. This was war. Or, at the very least, aggravated assault with a pair of garden tools. My first instinct is to grab the emergency portable oxygen tank from the closet. It's my in case of dire emergency backup, heavy as a small boulder, but right now, it's my best friend. Fumbling with the nozzle, I get the cannula secured. The hiss of cold, blessed oxygen filling my nostrils a small comfort in a sea of rising panic. My next call is 911. My fingers tremble as I dial, each gasp for air a stark reminder of the stakes. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher's voice is calm, professional, a little too routine for the 5-alarm fire currently raging in my chest. My HOA president, I begin, then have to pause to suck in another precious lungful of oxygen. Wire cutters. She cut my power, my life support. I can't. Sir, please try to calm down, the dispatcher says, still in that infuriatingly placid tone. An officer can be dispatched for a neighbor dispute. Did she threaten your person directly? She threatened my ability to continue being a person, I yell, or at least I try to. It comes out more like a strangled croak. She cut off my oxygen. That's pretty damn direct. We'll send someone to take a report, sir, she says. But utility matters are usually handled by the power company unless there's an immediate threat to life or property damage. I hang up, frustration a bitter, coppery taste in my mouth. They don't get it. They think it's a squabble over hedges or improperly sorted recycling. Time is not on my side. The police might take an hour, maybe more. The power company? Who knew? Days, possibly. The backup on the concentrator was already dead, and this portable tank, while a lifesaver, wouldn't last forever. My eyes, desperate for a solution, anything, fall on the ridiculously thick, spiral-bound HOA rulebook Karen had once gleefully used to cite me for unapproved mailbox font. It was practically her Bible, that thing. And then a spark. A tiny, sputtering ember of an idea in the oxygen-starved fog of my brain. If Karen weaponizes rules, if she lives and breathes by the letter of HOA law, then I'll return fire with the whole damn rule senile. I vaguely remember skimming a section, something buried deep in the addendums, about temporary necessary equipment for property maintenance or emergency situations. It was one of those catch-all phrases, deliberately vague. Oh, this is an emergency, all right, my emergency. And Karen, bless her cotton socks and her tyrannical little heart, just handed me the rule book to prove it. The next few minutes are a blur of frantic, breathless phone calls. First, to my doctor, Dr. Ramirez, a saint in sensible shoes. Bless her. She walks me through maximizing my portable tank's lifespan, her voice a calm anchor in my storm of panic. Deep, slow breaths, Mike. Don't exert yourself. And if you feel any dizziness, any confusion, you call an ambulance immediately. Understand? Got it, Doc. Thanks. Then, the main event. My fingers fly across my phone screen, Googling heavy-duty generator rental near me. The first result pops up. Big Mike's Generators and Heavy Hauls, when you absolutely, positively got to have the juice. Catchy, I like it. Big Mike's, Gus speaking. A voice like a foghorn answers. Friendly, but definitely no nonsense. Hi, Gus, I say, trying to sound more commanding than like a man whose lungs are currently staging a hostile takeover. I need a generator, a substantial one. Think small rock concert, or a very, very angry house that needs to make a statement. Gus chuckles, a sound like rocks tumbling in a cement mixer. I like your style, pal. Got a 40-ton diesel, just came off a hospital backup gig. She ain't pretty, drinks fuel like a sailor on shore leave, but she's got the juice to power a small town. Where to, Chief? A slow, oxygen-deprived, but deeply satisfied grin spreads across my face. The kind of grin that says, you have no idea what you just started, Karen. Rosewood Lane, I say, savoring the address. And make it snappy, Gus. I've got an HOA president to impress, and a life to save. Preferably mine. The clock is ticking. My portable tank is hissing away its precious contents, but the game, as they say, is on, and I'm about to bring a bazooka to a gnome fight. Not even an hour later, a sound begins to permeate the otherwise tranquil morning air of Rosewood Lane. It starts as a distant rumble, a low thrumming that vibrates through the soles of your feet. Heads, previously occupied with pruning roses or retrieving newspapers, pop out of windows and front doors like curious meerkats. Karen is, of course, meticulously deadheading her prize-winning peace roses, the picture of suburban serenity, completely oblivious to the symphony of internal combustion heading her way. Then it appears, turning slowly, majestically, onto our quiet, tree-lined cul-de-sac, is a truck. But calling it a truck is like calling a blue whale a fish. This thing is a behemoth, a titan of transportation, so large it seems to bend the very fabric of our sleepy suburban reality. Big Mike's Generators, We Bring the Juice, is painted on the side in letters you could probably read from the International Space Station. It's glorious. It's horrifying. It's absolutely, unequivocally perfect. The driver, a mountain of a man named Gus, who looks like he eats scrap metal for breakfast and arm wrestles bears for fun in his spare time, leans out of the cab, his elbow resting on the open window. He spots me on my porch, my trusty portable oxygen tank hissing faithfully by my side. I'm trying to look casual, like ordering industrial-grade power solutions is just another Tuesday morning activity for me. I probably just look like a man who's forgotten how to breathe properly, which isn't far from the truth. Mr. Henderson? Gus bellows, his voice easily carrying over the idling growl of his diesel steed. Your kilowatt cavalry has arrived. Mighty fine morning for it. Where do you want this beauty parked? She needs a bit of room to breathe, if you catch my drift. And a fairly level surface, unless you want her rolling into someone's prize petunias. He winks, a gesture so comically oversized it almost creates its own weather system. I feel a surge of adrenaline, a potent cocktail of desperation and defiant glee that I haven't felt in years. My hand, however, is a little shaky as I point. See that patch of perfectly manicured HOA-approved grass right there, Gus? I say, my voice stronger than I expect. The one that's technically my property, but coincidentally right next to Karen's award-winning and apparently orally sensitive petunias? That's the spot, my friend. Precision parking, if you please. We wouldn't want to disturb the aesthetic harmony. Now, would we? Gus's face splits into a wide, appreciative grin. A man of taste, strategic. I like a client with a clear vision, Mr. Henderson. Most folks just say, plonk it anywhere. No finesse. As Gus expertly begins to maneuver the Colossus into position, Karen's head snaps up. Her expression goes from serene rose admirer to slack-jawed disbelief in approximately 0.7 seconds. Her secateurs, the very same ones that probably still bear trace evidence of Bartholomew's cheerful paint, clatter unheeded to the pristine paving stones of her walkway. Her jaw isn't just dropped, it's practically unhinged. If I had a bit more oxygen in my system, I might have laughed out loud. Gus and his equally large offsider, a quiet man named Sal, who communicates mainly through grunts and expressive eyebrow raises, get to work with a terrifying, beautiful efficiency. Thick, Python-esque cables, the kind that look like they could power a small nation, unspool from the back of the truck. The generator itself, once offloaded onto my long-suffering driveway with a ground-shuddering thud, looks less like a piece of equipment and more like a modern art installation titled Suburban Annoyance. It's a vibrant, unapologetic industrial yellow, and it hums with latent power. It's big enough to power a small city, or, at the very least, send Karen's prize-winning petunias into early stress-induced retirement. Then, with a theatrical gesture from Gus, Sal hits a series of switches. There's a moment of charged silence, then a cough, a sputter, and finally, with a deafening, window-rattling roar, the beast comes to life. The ground trembles. Birds take flight from trees 3 blocks away. I imagine teacups are rattling in china cabinets all over Rosewood Lane. Inside my house, my oxygen concentrator, starved for so long, gives a happy, appreciative sigh and whirs back to its steady, life-giving rhythm. The relief is so intense, so profound, I almost cry. I take a deep, luxurious breath of machine-chilled oxygen, the sweetest air I've ever tasted. Oh, that's the stuff, I murmur, mostly to myself, patting the side of the concentrator like it's a faithful old dog. Sweet, sweet, medically necessary, gloriously noisy revenge. Karen, however, is not feeling the sweet relief. Her earlier shock has morphed into a volcanic fury. She's marching across her immaculate lawn, her face the color of a particularly angry eggplant, her fists clenched at her sides. She looks like a teapot about to whistle, if the whistle was a shriek of pure, unadulterated rage. "Henderson!" she screeches, her voice somehow cutting through the generator's mighty roar. "What is the meaning of this abomination? You are violating every noise ordinance in the Tri-County area, every aesthetic guideline this community holds dear. My hydrangeas are visibly vibrating. They're traumatized." I take another deep, calming breath, feeling the strength return to my limbs, the fog lift from my brain. I pick up the HOA rulebook from my porch swing, where I'd strategically placed it earlier. Time for a little light reading. "Actually, Karen," I say, my voice remarkably calm, amplified slightly by the righteous indignation still simmering within. I open the book to a pre-marked page. If you'll refer to page 82, section F, paragraph 3, regarding temporary necessary equipment for emergency situations. My rather critical medical emergency, which, as you'll recall, you so kindly instigated by, and I quote from your earlier pronouncement, suspending my power amenity over a perceived gnome-related infraction. This, my dear Karen, is both temporary and, as you can see by the very fact I'm still standing here talking to you, very, very necessary. As for the vibrations your hydrangeas are experiencing, consider it a complimentary deep tissue massage. They'll thank you for it later. Probably. A gnome is not an emergency, she sputters, her face contorting. This is horticultural terrorism. You're deliberately trying to destroy the tranquility of this neighborhood. My lungs, Karen, my lungs vehemently disagree on the emergency part, I counter, feeling a spark of my old fighting spirit. And Bartholomew the gnome, who is currently in my kitchen enjoying a well-deserved rest, is considering pressing charges for defamation and unlawful eviction. He was merely trying to live his best, most cheerful, and apparently orally offensive life. She sputters again, words failing her for possibly the first time in her long and storied HOA career. Her eyes dart around, probably looking for a bigger pair of wire cutters. Then, a new resolve hardens her face. She whirls around, her visor catching the sun like a malevolent halo. "I'm calling the police!" she shrieks, stabbing a finger dramatically towards my house, or perhaps towards Bertha the generator. It's hard to tell. They'll put a stop to this madness. Oh, I was counting on it, Karen. I was definitely counting on it. It doesn't take long. Rosewood Lane isn't exactly a hotbed of criminal activity, unless you count Mr. Henderson's dog leaving an unbagged deposit on Mrs. Gable's lawn last Tuesday, a scandal that occupied Karen for a full 3 days. So when Karen calls, they come. 2 police officers, a cruiser pulling up smoothly behind Bertha the generator, its flashing lights looking almost festive against Bertha's industrial yellow. Officer Miller is the older one, world-weary, with a mustache that seems to carry the weight of 1,000 domestic disputes. Officer Davis is younger, an eager rookie, but with a keen glint in his eye that suggests he's already seen enough to know when things are about to get interesting. Karen practically drags them by their sleeves from the car towards the generator, gesticulating wildly, her voice a torrent of aggrieved accusations. "Officers! Thank goodness you're here!" she exclaims, a tremor of theatrical desperation in her voice. This madman Henderson, he's trying to deafen the entire neighborhood. He's parked an illegal industrial thing right on his driveway, and it's an affront to civilized living. It's a menace. Officer Miller gives the generator a long, slow, appraising look. He looks at its massive engine, its thick cables snaking towards my house. Then his gaze travels to me, sitting calmly on my porch with my portable oxygen tank hissing quietly beside me. I give him a polite, neighborly nod. "Afternoon, sir, ma'am," Officer Miller says, his voice a tired baritone. He gestures vaguely at Bertha. "What seems to be the, core of the disturbance here?" "Morning, officers," I say, keeping my tone even and respectful. "Just Mike Henderson, endeavoring to maintain my current state of being alive. Miss Albright here, our esteemed Homeowners Association president, performed an impromptu and rather aggressive electrical modification to my property earlier this morning, specifically to the dedicated power source for my critical care medical equipment. Hence, Big Bertha here." I pat the side of the generator fondly. Bertha, in response, lets out a particularly resonant "Thrunk!" Officer Davis's eyebrows shoot up towards his hairline. "She cut power to your medical equipment, sir?" he asks, a note of disbelief in his voice. Karen waves a dismissive hand, as if swatting away an annoying fly. "It was an HOA violation," she insists, her voice rising in pitch. "His garden gnome was non-compliant. It was excessively whimsical. It was casting a shadow on Mrs. Periwinkle's prize-winning marigolds during peak sunlight hours." Officer Miller pinches the bridge of his nose, a gesture I'm starting to associate with anyone who has to deal with Karen for more than 5 minutes. A whimsical gnome. "Ma'am, with all due respect, did you physically tamper with Mr. Henderson's electrical meter or power supply?" Karen hesitates for a split second, her eyes darting from the officer to me, then back. I simply rectified a long-standing compliance issue by disabling the offending power source, she declares, puffing out her chest. It's standard HOA procedure for repeat offenders of aesthetic ordinances. She used a pair of heavy-duty wire cutters, officer, I interject calmly, directly on the main feed to my house. Got it all on my doorbell cam. Crystal clear footage. Even caught her muttering something about Bartholomew's smug, painted-on smile just before the snip. Sounded a bit personal, if you ask me. Officer Davis coughs, a sound that is suspiciously like a strangled laugh. He turns away, suddenly very interested in a crack in the sidewalk. Officer Miller sighs, a sound that speaks volumes of bureaucratic weariness. He turns his full attention to Karen, and his voice, when he speaks, has lost its earlier patience. It's now got an edge of steel. Ma'am, Homeowners Association regulations do not, and I repeat for clarity, do not, allow you or anyone else to unilaterally cut off someone's power. Especially when medical equipment is involved. That's reckless endangerment at the very least, not to mention destruction of property and potentially even more serious charges, depending on the specifics. The gnome, whimsical or otherwise, is entirely irrelevant to that fact. Karen's face pales slightly, but she rallies. But the bylaws, the aesthetic integrity of Rosewood Lane, the humming, it's been documented, there are complaints. The generator is on my property, officers, I say, gesturing around. Big Bertha is parked squarely on my driveway. Gus here. I nod towards the cab of the truck, where Gus gives a friendly, unconcerned wave, has all the necessary city permits for temporary emergency deployment. It's a bit noisy, I grant you, but considerably less so than, say, an ambulance siren, which was the next sound on the agenda thanks to Miss Albright's proactive gnome management and subsequent power cutting. Officer Miller looks from me to Karen, then back to the generator, then to his partner, who is now openly struggling not to grin. Ma'am, he says to Karen, his voice firm, we're going to need to take your statement regarding the incident with Mr. Henderson's power. Mr. Henderson, he turns to me, as long as this unit is legally permitted on your property and being used for a legitimate medical emergency that Miss Albright here apparently caused, our hands are tied regarding its presence. You have a right to power your medical devices. Karen looks like she's about to spontaneously combust. Her face is a mottled canvas of rage, disbelief, and dawning horror. The thin veneer of suburban order, so carefully curated by her iron will and clipboard, is cracking wide open, and the chaos, it seems, is on my side. For the first time all day, I take a breath that doesn't feel like it's being rationed. With the police having essentially given Bertha their blessing, or at least their reluctant acceptance, the immediate crisis of, will I be arrested for trying not to die, is averted. However, Bertha, magnificent as she is, drinks diesel like it's free beer at a tailgate party. I need my main power back, and pronto. I make a call to Chloe's Electric Eagles. We get you wired right. A local company with surprisingly good reviews and a catchy name. Chloe, the eponymous eagle, arrives about an hour later in a van that's seen better days, but hums with a reassuring efficiency. She's young, mid-30s maybe, with bright pink streaks in her hair and a tool belt that looks like it weighs more than she does. She takes one look at Bertha thundering away on my driveway, then at my oxygen tube, then at Karen, who is now stationed on her own porch like a sniper, glaring daggers at my house. Chloe just shakes her head and lets out a low whistle. Okay, Chloe says, pulling off her sunglasses. I'm gonna need coffee, a very large coffee, and the full unabridged story complete with any gnome-related subplots. Because this is already in my top 5 weirdest callouts, and it's only Tuesday. Last Tuesday it was a squirrel who'd built a nest in a transformer. You, sir, have officially topped the transformer squirrel. I give her the condensed version, emphasizing Karen's wire cutter enthusiasm. Chloe listens, nodding occasionally, a wry smile playing on her lips. She then gets to work, inspecting the mangled remains of my meter box. "Wow," she says after a few minutes of prodding and peering. "She really went to town on this, didn't she? This isn't a simple snip and resplice job. She's butchered the main feed. Looks like she tried to perform a C-section with garden shears. We'll need to replace the whole box, probably some of the conduit, and then get the utility company out here to inspect and sign off before we can even think about safely restoring your main line. This is going to take a few hours, maybe longer." "Just what I wanted to hear," I sigh. "Bertha's getting expensive?" Meanwhile, Rosewood Lane is a hive of activity. The generator has become an undeniable local landmark. Some neighbors are clearly annoyed by the relentless thrunk, 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 peering out from behind twitching curtains with disapproving frowns. Others, however, are secretly, or not so secretly, thrilled. Years of pent-up HOA grievances are finding a vicarious outlet in Bertha's defiant roar. Mrs. Periwinkle, owner of the allegedly traumatized petunias, and the even more allegedly traumatized cat, Bartholomew, no relation to my gnome, shuffles over, her expression a curious mix of concern and intrigue. "Mr. Henderson!" she calls out, her voice surprisingly strong for her diminutive stature. "That contraption is rather boisterous, isn't it? My Bartholomew," she gestures vaguely towards her house, "has taken refuge under the chaise lounge in the conservatory and is refusing his afternoon nap, and his salmon pâté sits untouched." "My deepest apologies for Bertha's enthusiasm, Mrs. Periwinkle," I say, trying to project sincerity over the din. "It's a temporary measure, I assure you. Our esteemed HOA president, in her infinite wisdom and apparently boundless enthusiasm for landscape ordinance enforcement, decided my garden gnome's joie de vivre was a capital offense punishable by potential asphyxiation. Bertha here is my temporary, albeit rather noisy, lifeline until Chloe the electrical eagle can perform her magic." Mrs. Periwinkle's eyes, magnified by her thick spectacles, narrow as she looks towards Karen's house, where Karen is now ostentatiously pretending to read a very large book on her porch swing, though I suspect she's listening to every word. "Oh, it was Karen?" Mrs. Periwinkle says, a new note of understanding in her voice. "That harridan told me last week my wind chimes, a gift from my late husband, mind you, sounded like a haunted scrapyard being attacked by angry banshees and were lowering property values. Well then," she straightens up, a martial glint in her eye. "You carry on, young man. My Bartholomew can learn to appreciate the robust symphony of industrial soundscapes, builds character, and frankly, a bit of noise is preferable to Karen's constant carping." She gives me a conspiratorial wink, a surprisingly jaunty gesture. A few other neighbors, emboldened by Mrs. Periwinkle's defection, give me subtle thumbs up from their driveways, or a wave from their windows. Little Timmy from across the street, a gap-toothed kid of about 8, rides by on his bicycle, eyes wide with awe at Bertha. "Awesome generator, Mr. Henderson," he shouts gleefully. "Is that for a bouncy castle? Can we have a bouncy castle?" "Even better, Timmy," I call back with a grin. "It's for annoying the Queen, and for keeping me breathing, but mostly for annoying the Queen." Chloe, overhearing this, just shakes her head and chuckles, then gets back to wrestling with a particularly stubborn piece of Karen-mangled electrical conduit. The battle for Rosewood Lane, it seems, has acquired allies. Just as Chloe is muttering something unladylike about the previous owner of the wire cutters and their apparent lack of basic electrical knowledge, a pristine white city vehicle pulls up to the curb with an air of official importance. Mr. Grumbles, a city code inspector whose face looks like it was carved from a block of granite by a very tired sculptor, climbs out, clipboard in hand. Karen, who must have a sixth sense for approaching bureaucracy, spots him from her porch and practically sprints across her lawn, arriving at his side just as he's taking in the full, glorious spectacle of Bertha. "Inspector! Oh, thank heavens! You're here!" Karen gushes, her voice a mixture of relief and righteous indignation. This illegal, oversized, fume-belching thing has been terrorizing our peaceful community all day. It's a clear violation of every imaginable ordinance. Shut it down! Shut it down immediately! For the sake of our property values and our sanity! Inspector Grumbles, whose name tag ironically reads, "Be happy," I suspect his parents had a cruel sense of humor, gives Karen a non-committal glance, then turns his stoic gaze upon Bertha, then me. His expression doesn't change by so much as a flicker. "Received a complaint," he states, his voice as dry as week-old toast. "Regarding an unpermitted industrial generator. Mr. Henderson, I presume?" "That's me, Inspector," I say, trying to look as harmless and medically fragile as possible, which isn't much of a stretch at the moment. "And this lovely lady is Bertha, my temporary, fully permitted emergency backup generator. A rather unfortunate necessity, I'm afraid. It arose when Miss Albright here, our Homeowners Association president," I gesture towards Karen, who is practically vibrating with anticipation, "decided to perform some rather enthusiastic and unlicensed electrical work on my main service panel this morning, the unfortunate consequence of which was the disabling of my life-sustaining medical equipment. Gus, who seems to possess an uncanny ability to materialize whenever permits are mentioned, emerges from the cab of his truck, a thick, well-organized binder in his hand. All city permits, noise variance waiver for documented emergency use, current emission certificate, and biannual maintenance logs are right here. Inspector," he says, handing the binder over with a confident smile. Bertha was freshly inspected and certified just last month. She's a good girl. Inspector Grumbles takes the binder and begins to flip through it with a surprising speed and efficiency, his granite face unreadable. Karen is practically hopping from one foot to the other, a coiled spring of impending vindication. After a few moments, Inspector Grumbles' left eyebrow raises by a millimeter, a seismic event for a face like his. He closes the binder with a soft thud and turns his attention to Karen. "Ma'am," he says, his voice still devoid of any discernible emotion. "You cut this man's power? To his medical unit?" Karen puffs up like an affronted pigeon. "It was an HOA bylaw enforcement action," she insists, her voice shrill. "His lawn ornament was non-compliant. It exceeded the maximum allowable whimsy by a significant margin. It was practically taunting the petunias." "Bartholomew the gnome," I interject sweetly, unable to resist, "who is currently recuperating on my kitchen counter from his traumatic ordeal, vehemently denies all charges of excessive whimsy or petunia taunting. He maintains he was merely festively asserting his right to exist as a cheerful ceramic entity." Inspector Grumbles, to his credit, completely ignores my gnome's legal defense. He keeps his gaze fixed on Karen. "Ma'am, an HOA bylaw, regardless of its stance on whimsical lawn ornaments, does not grant you the authority to sever a resident's utility power. That is a serious offense, potentially a criminal one, depending on the circumstances and the level of endangerment." The generator, he gestures towards Bertha, who chooses that exact moment to let out a particularly robust chug-chug vroom, based on these permits and the exigent medical circumstances that you appear to have directly created, is currently operating within legal parameters for temporary emergency use. Therefore, it stays. He then adds, almost as an afterthought, "However, I will be filing a comprehensive report with the city attorney's office regarding your enforcement action. And the utility company will also be formally notified of the unauthorized tampering with their equipment and the potential endangerment of a customer. Karen's face goes through a fascinating series of color changes, from triumphant red to a sort of shocked white, then to a greenish hue of disbelief, finally settling on a pale, defeated mauve. Her jaw actually drops. Her own beloved bureaucracy, the weapon she wielded with such righteous glee for so many years, was now firmly, unequivocally, aimed directly at her. The sweet, sweet, delicious irony of it all was almost as life-giving as the steady flow of oxygen Bertha was so diligently pumping out. Chloe, who had been watching the entire exchange with a mixture of awe and professional interest, lets out a barely perceptible snort of laughter and gets back to work on my mangled meter box with renewed vigor. The tide, it seemed, had well and truly turned. Bertha the generator, bless her noisy, fume-belching heart, had not only saved my life, but had also, it appeared, initiated the glorious downfall of Karen, Queen of the cul-de-sac. And it wasn't even lunchtime yet. Bertha, bless her 40-ton heart, roared all night long. It wasn't a gentle hum. It was a declaration, a defiant, throbbing, ground-shaking assertion of my right to breathe. And you know what? I slept like a heavily sedated baby. The rhythmic thrunk, 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 vroom, a strangely comforting lullaby of victory and, well, continued existence. You know those white noise machines people buy? I mused to myself as I drifted off. A genuine, non-oxygen-deprived smile on my face. Ocean waves, gentle rain, forest breezes, amateurs. Give me the dulcet tones of a 40-ton diesel generator running at full chat directly outside the bedroom window of the woman who tried to suffocate me over a ceramic gnome. That, my friends, is true peace. That is the sound of justice being served, 1 decibel at a time. I imagined Karen, 2 doors down, was probably not sleeping so soundly. I pictured her lying awake, the vibrations rattling her collection of Hummels, the fumes gently perfuming her prize-winning lace curtains. A petty thought? Absolutely. Did I care? Not one bit. The next morning, Rosewood Lane was subtly changed. There was a certain energy in the air. Or maybe it was just residual diesel fumes. Karen emerged from her house looking like she'd wrestled a badger in a wind tunnel and lost. Dark circles under her eyes, her usually immaculate hair askew, her visor slightly crooked. She shot a venomous glare at Bertha, then at my house, then scuttled back inside like a vampire confronted with a particularly enthusiastic crucifix. Chloe the Electric Eagle arrived bright and early, armed with a large coffee and a grim determination. "Morning, Mike," she chirped, surprisingly cheerful for someone about to do battle with Karen-inflicted electrical carnage. "Bertha sing you sweet dreams?" "Like a heavy metal angel," I confirmed. Shortly thereafter, the utility company truck, a big white symbol of impending normalcy and, hopefully, Karen's comeuppance, pulled up. 2 guys in hard hats got out, looking distinctly unimpressed by Bertha's continued serenade. They had the air of men who had seen it all, including, I suspected, the aftermath of many an unwise DIY electrical project. Later that afternoon, proving she possessed either the tenacity of a cornered badger or the complete obliviousness of a fence post, Karen had called an emergency HOA meeting in the little community park at the end of Rosewood Lane. Her email, sent out at the crack of dawn, presumably when she couldn't sleep due to Bertha's love song, had been full of capital letters, exclamation points, and vague references to preserving community standards and addressing egregious disturbances. Her intent, I gathered, was to rally the troops, to whip the neighborhood into a froth of anti-Henderson, anti-Bertha sentiment. It didn't quite go as planned. In fact, it went spectacularly, hilariously, off the rails for her. About 30 neighbors were there, a mix of the curious, the concerned, and the clearly entertained. I showed up, my trusty portable oxygen tank hissing companionably by my side, and took a seat on a park bench, trying to look as unassuming as possible while being the clear epicenter of the current neighborhood drama. Karen stood before us, clutching her clipboard like a life raft, her voice trembling with a potent cocktail of indignation and exhaustion. And this blatant affront to our community standards, she declared, sweeping a dramatic hand in the general direction of my house, though Bertha was thankfully out of sight from the park. This noise pollution, this generator, it is an outrage. Mr. Henderson is holding Rosewood Lane hostage with his personal power plant. He is laughing in the face of decency and our carefully curated property values. A beat of silence followed her pronouncement. Then, old Mr. Abernathy, a quiet widower from the end of the street who usually only spoke about his tomatoes, piped up, his voice surprisingly firm. "Hostage, Karen?" he said, peering at her over his spectacles. "Seems to me you're the one who took him hostage when you cut the fella's life support. Over a damn gnome, no less. My wife's cousin Mildred had one of them oxygen things before she passed." "It ain't a toy, Karen. It ain't a whim." Mrs. Periwinkle, never one to be outdone in the righteous indignation department, chimed in, her voice sharp. "And, for the record, Karen, my petunias have never looked more vibrant. I think they rather like the vibrations. Gives them a bit of a thrill. But your actions, Karen, your decision to play God with another person's electricity because you have a vendetta against garden statuary, that was despicable." I decided it was time for my cameo. I stood up slowly, taking a steadying breath. "Neighbors," I began, my voice calm but carrying in the quiet park. "I sincerely apologize for the noise and any inconvenience Bertha's presence has caused. Believe me, I'd much rather be using my quiet, indoor medical equipment, which, I might add, I was doing quite happily, until Miss Albright here took it upon herself to play amateur electrician with my life because my garden gnome, Bartholomew, was, and I quote from her earlier citation, excessively cheerful for a Tuesday. The generator, Bertha, will be gone the moment my power is safely and professionally restored, a process made significantly more complex and time-consuming by the, shall we say, enthusiastic and unorthodox nature of Miss Albright's initial disconnection. Susan, the dachshund-loving lawyer from 2 streets over, who usually only attended HOA meetings to complain about people not picking up after their dogs, a valid complaint, to be fair, cleared her throat. All eyes turned to her. She was holding a copy of the HOA CC and Rs, looking rather like a legal eagle about to swoop. "Karen," Susan said, her tone professional but firm. "I've taken the liberty of reviewing our covenants, conditions, and restrictions again this morning. Specifically, Article 9, Section 4, regarding utility access and HOA intervention. There is absolutely no provision allowing the HOA president, or any board member for that matter, to unilaterally sever a homeowner's utility connection. What you did, Karen, isn't just an HOA violation. It's potentially several criminal offenses, including reckless endangerment and destruction of property, and it has most certainly opened this entire homeowners association up to a lawsuit that would make our annual insurance premiums look like pocket change. The other 2 HOA board members, a nervous-looking accountant named Barry and a perpetually flustered woman named Carol, who had been standing slightly behind Karen looking increasingly green about the gills, suddenly found their shoes to be the most fascinating objects in the entire park. Barry mumbled something about needing to review the minutes. Carol began to fan herself vigorously, with a meeting agenda. One of them, I think it was Barry, cleared his throat nervously and said, his voice barely a whisper, Perhaps, Karen, we should discuss a motion for a voluntary leave of absence, or perhaps a leadership review." Karen's face, which had been a mask of defiant fury, crumpled. This wasn't just a lost argument. This was a public dismantling, a coup d'etat by common sense and threatened litigation. Her reign of HOA terror was, it appeared, drawing to a spectacular, generator-fueled close. Late that afternoon, after much wrestling with wires, consultations with schematics, sympathetic headshakes from the utility crew, who had clearly seen their share of bizarre electrical misadventures, and several more cups of coffee for Chloe, the moment finally arrived. Chloe, her pink hair now sporting a fetching smudge of grease across her forehead, wiped her brow and gave a triumphant grin. "All right, Mike," she announced, her voice echoing slightly in the now blessedly quieter driveway. Gus had temporarily idled Bertha down for the final switchover. "Moment of truth, you are officially back on the grid. Meter box is replaced, connections are solid, and I've even reinforced the casing with a bit of extra hardware. Short of Karen developing X-Men-like superpowers or acquiring a small tank, your electricity is safe from unauthorized gnome-related disconnections." "Chloe, you're a lifesaver," I said, meaning it with every fiber of my being. "Literally. Send me the bill, and be sure to add a hazardous Karen conditions bonus, plus extra for combat pay." She laughed. "Will do, Mike. It's been memorable." With a final series of checks, the main breaker was thrown. Inside my house, the lights flickered on, my refrigerator hummed back to life, and most importantly, my oxygen concentrator gave its familiar, gentle, life-sustaining sigh. No more roaring Bertha, just the quiet, steady rhythm of normalcy. Gus and Sal, who had been patiently waiting, began the process of loading Bertha back onto her massive flatbed. It was almost sad to see her go. She'd been loud, she'd been expensive. She'd probably lowered property values by a good 5% in the last 24 hours. But she'd also become a symbol. A very large, very noisy, diesel-powered symbol of defiance. "Pleasure doing business with you, Mr. H," Gus boomed, shaking my hand with a grip that could crush coconuts. "Been a real slice. Don't have this much fun on most jobs, I tell you. Call us if you ever need to. You know, gently encourage another neighborly understanding, or if that gnome of yours acts up again." He winked, a gesture that still felt like it could generate a small breeze. "You too, Gus," I said, genuinely sad to see them go. "You and Sal are welcome for a non-generator-related beer anytime. And if I ever need to declare war on a rogue squirrel with a taste for electrical wiring, you're my first call." Bertha the generator, with a final, almost mournful rumble vroom, rumbled off into the sunset, leaving a blessed, almost shocking silence in her wake. The only hum now was the gentle, familiar, and incredibly welcome one from my oxygen unit. As if on cue, as Bertha's taillights disappeared around the corner, a very official-looking young man in a slightly rumpled suit walked briskly up Karen's driveway and, after a brief, unheard exchange, handed her a sheaf of official-looking papers. Karen's face, if possible, got even paler than it had been at the HOA meeting. She took the papers with a trembling hand. I couldn't be sure from this distance, but they looked suspiciously like legal documents, the kind that usually start with, "You are hereby served." Sometimes, I mused, justice isn't just poetic. It's also beautifully, satisfyingly, bureaucratically delivered. A few weeks passed. The legendary Great Generator standoff of Rosewood Lane slowly began to fade into neighborhood lore, though not before young Timmy across the street tried to build a Lego replica of Bertha, and Mrs. Periwinkle reported that her cat, Bartholomew, had developed a strange fondness for watching construction vehicle documentaries on YouTube. Karen is gone. Not literally vanished into thin air, unfortunately, though one can dream. But she resigned from the HOA board, effective immediately, citing pressing personal reasons and a sudden desire to explore minimalist living in a yurt in Montana. Her house, much to the relief of many, now sports a bright, cheerful for sale sign that, I notice with a private smirk, is positioned a good quarter-inch too close to the sidewalk, according to the old draconian bylaws she herself used to enforce with such vigor. The HOA has new interim leadership. Susan, the dachshund-loving lawyer, has reluctantly agreed to take the helm, on the condition that all future discussions of lawn ornaments be kept to a strict 5-minute maximum. The first item on their revised agenda: a complete and utter overhaul of the aesthetic compliance and enforcement sections of the CC&Rs, with a brand new, heavily underlined clause specifically stating that access to essential utilities for documented medical purposes shall not be infringed upon, obstructed, or otherwise messed with by any means under penalty of extreme HOA disapproval and possible public shaming. They even sent me a very nice fruit basket with a little card that said, "Our sincerest apologies for the gnomish misunderstanding." My own garden gnome, Bartholomew, is back in his rightful spot by the azaleas. He's become something of a local celebrity. Mrs. Periwinkle, in a gesture of inter-Bartholomew solidarity, gifted him a tiny, intricately knitted firefighter's helmet, which he now wears with a jaunty air. People on their evening walks sometimes stop and take pictures. I've even seen a few teenagers leave him small offerings: a bottle cap, a shiny pebble, a half-eaten lollipop. He's the unofficial mascot of Rosewood Lane Common Sense. Life on Rosewood Lane is different now. Quieter, mostly. The loudest thing these days is usually just Mr. Henderson's overly enthusiastic leaf blower, and even that seems somehow less offensive than it used to. It's a good quiet, though. The kind of quiet that says, we're all in this suburban experiment together, so let's try not to actively endanger each other's lives over lawn decor, okay? It's the kind of quiet that says, we respect each other's right to breathe here, both literally and figuratively. And every now and then, when the wind is just right, I swear I can still hear the faint, ghostly rumble thrunk of Bertha, a fond echo in the suburban silence. A reminder that sometimes, to get a little peace, to ensure a little common decency, you first have to bring the noise, and a really, really, really big generator. I'm sitting on my porch now, enjoying the late afternoon sun, a glass of iced tea sweating pleasantly in my hand. My oxygen concentrator hums its sweet, steady song of survival beside me. Bartholomew stands guard by the azaleas, his firefighter helmet glinting. I raise my glass to him. He doesn't wink. He's ceramic, after all. But I like to think he appreciates the gesture. Next to him, a new addition to the garden menagerie. A miniature, perfectly detailed toy replica of a 40-ton industrial generator. Just because. You know, for old time's sake. And as a gentle reminder to any future HOA presidents who might get any bright ideas about whimsicality levels and wire cutters.